Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled People. In today's episode, despite the will, my Aunt Karen thinks my parents' property belongs to her. 2 tables for 1 person. Update 3, entitled Aunt achieves ultra greed status and attempts to steal vehicles will to nephew. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Despite the will, my Aunt Karen thinks my parents' property belongs to her. This happened almost 5 years ago, and I just got notice yesterday that my entitled Aunt Karen has just died, and I got a call from her husband asking me to attend the funeral next weekend, and I declined. As did my older brother, Mark, for purposes of this story. Karen was my mother's older sister, and she constantly interfered in my mother and her children's lives. She never liked my father and always tried to tell my mother that she made a mistake by marrying him. She didn't like the name my parents picked out for my older brother, and my great-grandmother died the day before I was born, and when Karen found out they were going to name me after her, Karen freaked out and said she wanted to name her potential future kid that so my mother couldn't use it. Then she tried to talk her out of it by saying it's too old-fashioned and kids would make fun of me, which they did, but for other reasons, see my username for a clue. She criticized both my brothers and my choice of friends and even complained when I started playing softball, because proper ladies didn't play sports, and if her daughter ever tried playing a sport, she would have her removed from the team. Spoiler, she never had children. The day after my 16th birthday, my parents drove on a business trip down to California. I live in Idaho. My dad said that when they got back, he would drive me to the DMV to get my license. He never did, because on the drive to California, they hit a patch of ice, spun out, crashed, and died. I was a wreck for some time after that. I didn't even want to attend my high school graduation later because my parents wouldn't be there. They will split everything evenly between my brother and I. At the funeral, my parents, who owned their own business, production manager, Tim, was talking to my brother, and my brother told him that in a couple weeks, he would step in and take over, and he was counting on Tim to run things smoothly until then and help him in taking it over and learning the ropes. I had no interest in the business, other than it was a guaranteed summer job when I was growing up, so I stayed out of it and just collected profit checks until I sold my half to Mark, and he continues to run the business to this day. Mark told Tim that he should assure the employees there that their jobs were safe and that no major changes would be made. Then one day, Aunt Karen showed up and began putting her stuff in my parents' office, and when Tim confronted her about this, she said his services were no longer needed and he was fired. Tim called Mark up, and Mark went down with the family attorney, some police, and the necessary paperwork, and had her removed, while she said the place was now hers because it was her sister's, so she was now the owner. As long as I have known her, she has never had a steady job, and has had 3 husbands, not counting the man who called me, never met him, and milked each one for as much as she could get until she divorced him. The next day, I was leaving for school. I walked, it was fairly close, about 10 minutes, and saw her car and a moving van parked outside. She said she was moving into her house and then said in a sickly sweet voice that for a reasonable rent, she would continue to allow me to stay there until I graduated high school. I went in and called my brother, and he again showed up with the family attorney, police, and all the paperwork and had her removed from the property. I was at school, so I didn't get to see what happened, but that night, Mark gave me a business card for a policeman, who I assume helped deal with all this, and told me that if I ever saw Aunt Karen on or near the property to call that number and report her immediately. Don't even try to confront her or give her a warning, just call. I do know that the movers charged her to move her stuff into the van, drive across town, get turned away and drive back across town and move her stuff back into her apartment, which she hadn't given notice yet. I got scared to the point that I didn't like letting our dog into the backyard when I was at school. I used to put her out in the yard to let her play in the fenced backyard while I was in school. For a while, I just put her in the locked and closed garage, and then cleaned up her messes when I got home in the afternoon. Eventually, Karen moved to Colorado, where I assume she met and married the man who called me and said that she had died and he couldn't find anyone from her family to attend the funeral. I chose not to tell him about her, politely said, "Sorry for your loss, but I can't make it." From discussions with Mark, he basically told him the same thing. Outside of myself, Mark, and Mark's infant daughter, I don't think she has any living relatives. I still own the house. Mark gave me his half as part of the deal where I sold him my half of the business, but still sleep in my bedroom. I refuse to move into what was once my parents' bedroom, the master bedroom, go to the local university, go Broncos, and still miss my parents and think about them every day. And even though I am 21 in less than 2 weeks, own a large home, have a lot of money in the bank, I would trade it all to have my parents back, but I don't care about the how or why of Aunt Karen's death. I am sorry for your loss and am glad that you and your brother have each other. Your parents apparently planned well to make sure that you two would be financially secure without them. Spoiler, she never had children. For the safety and sanity of these imaginary children, thank goodness she never produced them. Not all people are fit to be parents. As much as she tried to parent my brother and I'm surprised she never had any of her own. As my brother says, who in their right mind would knock her up anyway? Imagine telling your orphan niece that you're moving into what's legally their home, but she can stay if she pays rent. What a ghoul of a woman. Sorry for your loss and for the fact you had to deal with her at all. I am so beyond sorry for the tragic loss of your parents, and at such a young age too. That is unimaginably awful, and then to deal with that additional stress? I'm sure your parents are proud of where you are in life. Keep going, mate. 2 tables for 1 person. Just a quick vent. So, I'm a mom to a 17-mo, and for my me time, I go hang out at a Starbucks to just relax. I currently live in a college town, so it is not uncommon to see students studying and working in the Starbucks as well. However, there are 2 separate college students each using 2 tables for themselves. That's a total of 4 tables being used. I personally think this is so rude and entitled. Do you really need all that space for yourselves? Ugh, so inconsiderate. Starbucks management is there. They will get you a table. Management doesn't care when there are plenty of tables. When it is busy and other paying customers need a table? They care. Give management a chance to both take care of your need for a table and to teach these children for the price of a cup they don't own the joint. That's fine and all, but I would ask the students to move their stuff off one of the tables before I looked for a manager because maybe they are thinking that if no one asks, no one needs it. I wrote half my master's thesis in a coffee shop, but I used a very small table and that's it. I agree, it's inconsiderate. I'm a student. I like to study in Costa. I do take up a 4-chair table with my books. But I leave when they start getting busy. I don't live in an area with a large student population though. This Costa isn't local to the college. One of the local coffeehouses enforces a strict 1-hour time limit for students if they aren't buying anything else. It's a few miles from the university, and prior to this rule, students would take up tables for hours, sometimes buying only 1 drink, but sometimes not. Update 3, entitled Aunt Achieves Ultra Greed Status and Attempts to Steal Vehicles Will to Nephew. So this is a pretty big update, buckle up. I really did not want to tell my uncle on the weekend of Thanksgiving, cause Canada, so I opted to wait till Monday since it was a long weekend. I got my lawyer at my place, I got my uncle at my place, sat my uncle down and I put what I found in front of him. He asked what it all meant and so I had to tell him that the total sum of $977,000 plus dollar is missing and is what EA stole from him. He broke down, couldn't comprehend why she did it. Aside from that I would say that he handled it fairly well and even he didn't know what to do so my lawyer explained it. In Canada this goes down as financial abuse, and there is good reason for that. Since my uncle gave EA his bank card and PIN number in good faith, expecting that she would use it only for the purpose of paying his bills and getting him groceries, the fact that she withdrew money without him knowing is what brought that to light. Now, financial abuse in Canada is a federal crime. The fact that the money she took was a settlement? That makes it even worse. This is where it gets complicated. Because of the amount of money, this isn't a civil matter. My uncle agreed to take action, and so what we had to do was get not only the provincial government involved, but also the federal government involved. One thing about agencies? Sometimes they work good together, sometimes not. We met up with representatives on Wednesday, October 11th. They explained how things would be done, what to expect ECT. Yesterday, October 12th. EA and her boyfriend were arrested and charged. Both refused to speak without the presence of an attorney, which is their right. EA tried to call my uncle, but wasn't allowed to, so she called my mom and tried to tell my mom that it was all bullshit. I was lying, my uncle was lying, she took care of my uncle, he never paid for the house, she never took anything, went into detail as to how much of a burden I was on the family ECT. So they already had a warrant to search EA's house. They did find some of the money. The advisor told us that usually when people steal a large sum of money, they do something called squirreling, where they will stash the money away in a mattress, under floorboards, in walls, door panels, etc. In this case, they found upwards of $87,000 stashed in airplane carry-on bags. So far, at this time, keep in mind that they are still searching, but in order to do certain things, such as cut holes in floors and walls, they do need different warrants for that. All of EA's bank accounts have been frozen. They have people looking into every single transfer and transaction she ever made. They also flagged my cousin's bank accounts and her grandchildren's accounts, pretty much anyone that got money from her. Their accounting for the last 5 years is going to be gone through with a fine-tooth comb and a microscope. The way my lawyer explained EA's situation is this: the more money they get back, the better it will be for her, but both her and her boyfriend are still in jail, saying they didn't take sh*T, so maximum they are looking at 7 years in prison, minimum 3 years in prison, plus they will have to pay reparations not only to my uncle but also the government, because the federal government most definitely will be charging her with some sort of fraud/tax evasion, which I think is a joke, because when I was 17 I was in prison, turned 18 in prison, and got 2 years plus 287 days of probation, house arrest, for multiple assault charges, but that's just my opinion. 7 years for stealing almost $1 million is all. I did make a statement detailing how this whole situation came about and how I found what I found, so that will be used in court, but at this point, this is where my involvement ends. My uncle is doing okay. He is doing a few home improvement projects, making shelves, etc. So I told him that if he wanted to use my shop he could, and he has taken me up on that offer, which is good, because it keeps his mind off of the whole situation, and I have also noticed that he also doesn't drink as long as he is busy. I will try to keep this updated as best I can, but at this point it really is just a waiting game. EA's side of the family is, of course, defending her, so once again I have become public enemy number one, but my mom, uncles, and especially my great aunt are not in her corner this time around. So for the end of this, I just wanted to go through a little bit of a timeline just for a bit of a recap, and it will also fill in some holes. So 2018 was when my uncle had his accident. From 2018 to 2020 is when EA had access to his banking information. 2020 is when EA had also kicked my uncle out of the house he was renting from her in a written rent-to-own agreement. At the same time, EA had also sold her house in the small town I grew up in, which was 3x larger than and in a much better area than the house she was renting to my uncle is. After that took place, they didn't speak to each other for almost 2 years. Fast forward to 2023, my uncle wanted me to go over his funds just to get a head start and see if he could get any more money on his 2023 tax return, which is when I found out that around $825,000 was missing out of the settlement he got, and around $100,000 was accounted for, which now leads us here. My final thoughts on the situation. I honestly do think that EA did plan this from start to finish, from selling her house to kicking my uncle out simply because she just wanted to take more, and that was the only way she saw where she could take more, and that left my uncle damn near homeless. Do I wish it happened this way? No, I don't, but I also think at the same time this needed to happen. Hopefully now EA will actually begin to understand what kind of harm materialism brings you all, because of the fabricated perception of status it brings some people. Thank you for taking the time to read. Have a good day/evening. I'm glad that the authorities are taking you seriously. But now that there's a formal investigation, you should stop talking about it online. I'll be waiting for an update when the case will be closed. Good luck, OP. Take her to the cleaners. Agreed, but I can't wait for the update when it's all over. I'll have to remember to make popcorn. I had a homeless friend, RIP, who had a border collie named Stinky. He trained her to sniff out paper money. It does have a distinctive odor. He'd take her downtown on Friday and Saturday night and run her through parking lots. See, drunks leave a bar, pull out their keys, and sometimes money falls out. He said he could make $40 to $60 a night. They need to run Stinky through EA's house. She'd find the money. Jokes aside, the border agents have money dogs that can find it. Since the Canadian feds and courts are involved now, it will be child's play for them to tear through everything and find it all. I'm so glad your uncle has you in his corner. Good on you, keeping him busy in the shop, too. You're a treasure. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.